I am a master psychotherapist renowned in the industry. Everyone considers my skills exceptional and my professionalism impeccable. Each of my therapy sessions is considered a miracle. My techniques are deemed perfect. However, no one knows that I actually know very little about psychology. In fact, I do not treat patients with professional knowledge, but because I can hear their inner thoughts. Later, I successfully became a friend to women using my mind-reading ability, and even managed to win over Victoria, a lesbian. I pretended to be the assistant of my sister, Emily, to help her with business negotiations. The woman on the other side was cold and arrogant. Emily exclaimed that she was difficult to deal with and asked what I, as a psychology expert, could see in her expressions. I silently wiped sweat because I just heard her inner voice when she spoke to Emily. She thought, "She is so good-looking. If she smiles at me, I'll concede another point." Emily said, "Aren't you going to say something?" Emily, sipping water, poked my arm to urge me. For a moment, I even doubted whether my superpower had failed hearing such an unbelievable thought. I nervously pushed away Emily's hand and said, "Let me listen again. No, take another look." Emily squeezed out a few words through her teeth. "You call yourself a psychology expert? Are you fooling people every day?" I didn't argue because she was right. I've had a special skill since childhood. As long as I make eye contact with someone, I can hear their inner voice. But I always say it's strong analytical ability. As a child, I used this ability to tell fortunes for snacks, and later I got a psychology qualification and opened a consulting office. Everything went smoothly. It's all because I couldn't resist the temptation of my sister's PS that I ended up in this business negotiation. And now, I've encountered a lesbian. I silently looked at my sister. She indeed had a superior appearance since childhood. I only knew that many boys had confessed to her, but I didn't expect she attracted both genders. The heiress of the Lou group, Victoria, was actually interested in her. Emily has a big temper. If she knew that Victoria had feelings for her, she would definitely break it off with her, and my PS5 would be gone. What should I choose, the PS5 or my sister? Emily glanced at me with disdain in her thoughts. He looked so foolish, definitely unreliable. I was speechless. All right, I'll choose the PS5. So I whispered, "Give her a smile." She asked, "What?" I whispered back, "Just smile at her." Emily thought she misheard me and looked at me in disbelief, whispering, "Am I crazy, smiling at her in such a serious occasion?" I replied, "If you smile, she'll concede." Emily was speechless. I said, "This is from analyzing her micro-expressions. Trust me, I'm a professional." Emily valued this project. She had been working on it for 2 months. Hearing this, she suspiciously turned to Victoria, stood up, handed her some water, and forced a stiff smile. She said, "Miss Victoria, are you thirsty? Have some water?" From the corner of my eye, I saw Emily's skirt stuck in her safety shorts as she stood up. I nearly spat out my water, holding back my laughter. I had to look away to keep from laughing. When I turned my head, I met Victoria's eyes. Her almond-shaped eyes slightly lifted, and her delicate features blushed with a hint of shyness. She glanced at my face and took the water Emily handed to her. She said, "Okay." Emily nodded. "The weather is dry, girls should drink more water." Victoria shook her head and said, I'm willing to concede another point." Emily was bewildered, and the difficult project was settled just like that. My sister walked out of the conference room, almost wagging her tail with pride. She boasted, "If I had known my smile had such power, I would have practiced earlier." I was speechless. I didn't tell her that when Victoria took the water, she thought, "I like her so much, I want to have her children." I only have one sister, and her boyfriend is my good friend. They have a great relationship, always sticking together. The Lou family is so wealthy. What if Victoria and my sister really get together? How would I explain that to my brother-in-law? Reading too many online dramas, I've imagined all kinds of tragedies born from love. I grabbed Emily's arm seriously and said, "Sis, listen to me. Promise me work is work, but don't ever have dinner alone with Miss Victoria." Just as I said this, I felt a chill on the back of my head. Turning around, I saw Victoria standing not far away, looking upset, her eyes on me and Emily's hands. She was guessing in her mind, what is their relationship? Why are they so close? Oh no, a misunderstanding. The contract wasn't signed yet. I couldn't let this fall apart. I quickly released Emily's hand and stood 800 meters away from her. Emily also saw Victoria and warmly said, "Miss Victoria, are you leaving? How about having dinner together?" I was speechless. Why was she pushing this? I kept winking at Emily, but she didn't get it. She asked, "Are your eyes uncomfortable?" I could only give up. I wanted to wash my hands of the situation, but when I opened my phone, I thought of the game skin my brother-in-law bought me. Such a loyal friend, even though I can read minds, I've never heard him think ill of me. For my brother-in-law, I must protect my sister's honor. If you can't beat them, join them. I stood between them, smiling obsequiously. "Miss Emily, Miss Victoria, I know a restaurant with great ambiance. Let me take you there." Victoria's gaze kept shifting towards us in the elevator. Her inner thoughts grew more and more shameful. She thought, her lips looked so kissable. I swiftly took a mask from my bag and handed it to Emily. I said, "Miss Emily, there's smog today. You should wear this." Victoria's eyes drifted downwards as she thought, "She has such a great figure, obviously works out regularly, and she exudes hormones. I really like her." I quickly stepped between them, becoming a barrier. While separating them, I couldn't help but catch a whiff of the lingering aroma of Emily's lunch, a strong-smelling snail noodle dish. I twitched my mouth. Victoria had some intense tastes. I glanced her way and met her gaze. Victoria quickly looked away, thinking, such a great body covered up. She would look amazing without a top. Unconsciously, I exclaimed, "Pervert." The elevator, already quiet, fell even more silent. Emily and Victoria both turned to look at me. Emily took off the mask I had forced on her and said, "Are you crazy?" Victoria said nothing but thought, "How can she look so good with every expression? It's unbearable. A really heavy taste, a yandere lesbian." I feigned calmness, cleared my throat, and said, "I suddenly remembered a news story from this morning. The protagonist was quite perverted. Throughout the meal, I took every precaution to ensure their safety." Later, I asked Emily if Victoria had contacted her again. Emily squinted at me and said, "Do you think everyone has as much free time as you? Miss Victoria is very busy, okay?" I later found out that Victoria graduated from C University and was my alumni. She was the only daughter of the richest man in Jin District, a typical wealthy princess. With her stunning looks, she should have been well known on campus. However, I had never heard of her during my studies. Victoria indeed hadn't contacted Emily for several days. I assumed she lost interest, her feelings for Emily having cooled. Or maybe, as Emily said, she was very busy with work. However, my peace didn't last long. One day, Victoria appeared at my psychology consulting office. She said, "Mr. Alex, what a coincidence." Victoria wore light makeup as delicate as a crescent moon, exuding a natural beauty. Her hair was casually tied into a loose, low ponytail, with a few strands falling gently on her face, paired with a soft beige lace dress, giving her a homely look. She gracefully sat across from my desk and asked, "Aren't you Miss Emily's assistant?" I looked at the nameplate on the desk with my name, Alex, and awkwardly laughed. "I do part-time work when I'm not busy." I paused and continued, "Miss Victoria, you booked 2 hours of psychological counseling. Can you tell me about your situation? For someone of her status, it likely wasn't financial troubles, so it had to be emotional issues. Could it be related to my sister?" I stretched my neck, staring at her eyes, trying to hear something. But all I saw was a blush on Victoria's face before she took out sunglasses from her pocket and put them on. I was speechless. She said, "Sorry, I get nervous when you look at me like that." I laughed. She was afraid I'd see through her intentions towards Emily, but it was too late. I had already seen through her. I said, "It's okay, Miss Victoria. Whatever makes you comfortable. What's troubling you lately?" She paused, then said, "I've fallen for someone, but I'm not worthy of her." The sip of water I'd just taken got stuck in my throat, nearly choking me. I asked, "Are you serious?" Just then, Emily, looking flirtatious, walked into my office. She didn't recognize Victoria's back through the glass and gave me a wink. Victoria continued, "She's very unique." Emily was at the reception desk, gobbling up the breakfast our receptionist had brought. Her cheeks were puffed out like a squirrel. I was speechless. Victoria went on. Her smile is like winter sunshine. My eyes are always drawn to her. I could almost see Emily's wisdom teeth as she laughed heartily. Victoria continued, "She's very interesting, someone everyone would like." Emily turned and saw me looking at her, flipping me off, urging me to hurry up. I expressionlessly withdrew my gaze. I said slowly, "You are worthy." Victoria was taken aback and softly asked, "What?" I replied, "She's not as great as you think." Victoria countered, "No, she's one of a kind, the best person I've ever met." Though love can make people see perfection, Victoria was clearly blind. I shook my head and said, "Miss Victoria, you must be really hungry. If this person is causing you so much trouble, it means you're not a good match. I advise you to let go." Victoria said nothing, just stared at me, lost in thought. After a while, she lowered her head and smiled slightly. "I can't let go. I've liked her for 7 years." I understood but was shocked. I glanced outside and saw Emily hiccuping, shaking with each one. I was speechless. Victoria looked at her phone and said, "Mr. Alex is truly skilled. Just talking for half an hour made me feel much better." I was speechless. What did I even do? Victoria added, "In a month, I have an important meeting abroad, but my current mental state worries me. So, I want to hire you as my personal consultant for a month. Can you counsel me any time?" I was surprised and replied, "You know I charge by the hour, right?" She said, "20,000 a day." I responded, "No problem at all." I flashed a professional smile. "I'm at your service 24/7. I couldn't resist the offer. Though my family is well off, I've always been raised frugally. 20,000 a day was too tempting. When Victoria saw Emily as she left, she was clearly surprised but just slightly frowned and greeted her before leaving. Ah, such intense yet restrained love. After she left, I turned to Emily feeling conflicted. Such a complicated fate. Emily said, "Little brother, what kind of look is that?" She lifted a package and said, "I told you I'd get it for you. My much-anticipated console. Wow, what a goddess of a sister." I said, "I knew you were the best." I immediately gave Emily a big hug. The next second, I saw Victoria return, standing at the door with a wronged expression. When our eyes met, she thought, "So she already has someone she likes." I wanted to explain, but then I thought, if Victoria gave up on Emily, it would be a win-win. So I naturally put my arm around Emily's shoulder and said, "Miss Victoria, why are you back?" Victoria lowered her eyes and bit her lip. "I forgot to ask when Mr. Alex plans to move into my house. I'll send someone to pick you up." I was stunned and asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "Didn't we agree that you would be available 24/7? Since it's psychological counseling, it should be face-to-face. It wouldn't be convenient to call you over in the middle of the night. Why don't you move in, choose a room you like, and treat it as a business trip for a month? What do you think, Mr. Alex?" Only then did I remember that I needed to be face-to-face to read her mind. So, I had to live with her. I cleared my throat and said, "Okay, I'll pack up and move in tomorrow." Emily, sensing something was off, grabbed my arm and asked, "Move in? Where are you going to live?" I leaned in and whispered, "I'll explain later." This intimate gesture caught Victoria's eye. She nodded and said, "All right, I'll send someone to pick you up tomorrow." Victoria glanced at me, her gaze sweeping over Emily before she turned and left. I stood there, stunned. In that last glance, she thought, "I won't let go, never." Victoria's obsession with Emily was so strong. What should I do? Emily frowned and poked me. "Spill it, where are you moving?" After explaining everything, she decisively wanted to learn some psychology from me. She said, 20,000 a day, I want that job too." I helplessly asked, "Answer me first, did you know Victoria 7 years ago?" Victoria said she had liked Emily for 7 years, but Emily had never mentioned her. Emily looked puzzled and said, 7 years ago, I was studying in Australia. Don't you remember? I only came back once during your junior year, and that's when I met my romantic, devoted, gentle boyfriend." Seeing her about to reminisce about her love story, I interrupted, "Did you meet anyone else when you came back?" Emily thought for a moment and suddenly remembered, I added someone's WeChat. It was your classmate, I think. Emily said that when she came back to visit me at C University, there was a large-scale viral pneumonia outbreak in C City. I had a fever in the dormitory, and she went out to buy medicine for me. She accidentally bumped into a girl who gave her the medicine, insisting she was fine. Emily added her WeChat to repay her, but the girl never responded. Emily suspected the WeChat was fake. She said, "Maybe it was a girl who had a crush on you. No wonder you're so popular, little brother." I didn't dwell on Victoria's matter. I thought if I could counsel her well for a month, she might move on. Matters of the heart can't be forced. The next day, I moved into Victoria's house. I expected a wealthy heiress like her to have many staff, but to my surprise, she lived alone in a 3-story house. She wore a French-style floral dress, walking lightly as she led me to the second floor. She asked, "Which room do you prefer, Mr. Alex?" I replied, "Any room is fine, the one in the middle." Victoria opened the door, and I was surprised to see it fully furnished, as if it had been prepared in advance. I asked, "Which room is yours, Miss Victoria?" She hesitated, her gaze shifting between the rooms on either side, then randomly pointed to the left. "This one." I was speechless. Did she just decide? She noticed my confusion and smiled slightly. "I thought it would be better if I stayed close in case I needed you urgently. 1 floor apart isn't too far." I forced a smile. "How are you feeling today, Miss Victoria?" She sighed softly. "Not great, no appetite." "Really?" She was clearly in a good mood, probably happy to have temporarily separated me from Emily. Feeling hungry after a busy day, I casually asked, "Would you like to have dinner together?" She replied, "Sure." Despite saying she had no appetite, she rushed to the kitchen faster than anyone. That evening, Victoria cooked herself. To my surprise, the dishes she made were exquisite and delicious. I said, "Miss Victoria, your cooking is excellent. It reminds me of a specialty restaurant near my university, but it closed the year I graduated." Feeling full, I leaned back in my chair, holding my stomach. Victoria smiled faintly. "I'm glad you like it." I casually asked, "We're alumni, but we never met at school, right?" Victoria lowered her gaze, sipping her coffee. "Yes, you probably never saw me." Before bed, Victoria stood at my door, pointing to a room in the corner of the 3rd floor. "Don't go into that room. You can go anywhere else, Mr. Alex." I nodded, suppressing my curiosity. Everyone has their privacy. But then I realized, does that mean I can enter her bedroom too? Since I was paid, I aim to provide excellent service. During the day, when Victoria went to work, I lounged on her office sofa, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. But despite my efforts, someone noticed me. Coming out of the restroom, I was blocked by a man. He looked me up and down and asked, "What's your relationship with Victoria?" "She's my woman." I stared into his eyes, hearing him curse me in his mind. This clown looks like a bum. Probably has no real job and is just hanging around Victoria. But what if she really falls for him? I joined Liu Group to pursue her, but she ignores me. Could she really like this loser? I realized he was a rich 2nd generation, the son of one of Liu Group's partners, working there to chase Victoria. "A savior." I said, "I can't disclose anything about Miss Victoria, but remember, I believe in you." I looked at him earnestly, shaking his hand. "You must work hard, don't give up." He was stunned, then quickly withdrew his hand. "You didn't wash your hands." Embarrassed, I put my hands in my pockets. Rude. I didn't want to help him anymore. Due to spending extra time in the restroom, I came out to see Victoria nearby, discussing something with someone, her gaze briefly flicking towards me before quickly looking away. The man from earlier walked out and brazenly approached her, saying, "Victoria, your father invited me to dinner at your place tonight. Let's go together." Victoria gave him a look that didn't require mind reading to see the disdain in it. Clearly, this guy had no chance. Victoria said, "You can go by yourself. I have other plans tonight." He persisted. "What plans, Victoria?" "I asked your assistant, and you don't have anything urgent." Leaning against the wall, I continued to eavesdrop. Victoria suddenly pointed at me and said, "That's my psychologist." I was utterly dumbfounded. Victoria continued, I have depression and need treatment. The atmosphere grew quiet as everyone turned to look at us. Victoria coldly added, "If you don't mind me losing control and flipping tables, I can join you for dinner." Her words prompted a collective gasp from the crowd. The man stepped back and reluctantly said, "All right, no dinner then. Take care of your health." But inwardly he thought, "She's a nutcase, no wonder she's a bastard child." I was momentarily stunned. So Victoria was the Liu family's illegitimate child? The disdain in his eyes made me uncomfortable. A moment ago he was full of affection. Now Victoria's admission of depression had changed everything. I handed him my card and seriously said, "If you need help, feel free to contact me." He looked puzzled. "I'm not sick." I replied, "Histrionic personality disorder is still a disorder. Don't give up on treatment." Victoria glanced at me as we walked back. Halfway, she bit her lip and said, "I have nothing to do with him." Not sure why she was telling me this, I replied, "I know." Back home, I went to rest, but was woken in the middle of the night by the sound of a breaking cup. I saw a light coming from the corner room on the 3rd floor. With only Victoria and me in the house, I wondered what she was doing up there so late. I hesitated, but decided to investigate. It felt like all my fears were amplified in the darkness. Barefoot and tense, I crept upstairs, only to have the door open with a creak. Victoria stood there in a thin nightgown, a slight sheen of sweat on her forehead, her chest rising and falling with her breathing. I froze, caught in an awkward posture. She seemed at a loss for words, so I spoke first. "Can't sleep? Is something bothering you emotionally? You can talk to me about it." I was stretching my legs after sitting too long. Victoria bit her lip, her gaze dropping to my feet. Without a word, she approached and gently supported my arm, the warmth of her touch spreading through the thin fabric of her gown, making me stiffen slightly. She was so close I could almost feel her breath. Slowly, she guided me back to my room, her eyes dark and unreadable as she softly said, "Go to bed early." My heart pounded as I leaned against the door after she left. I couldn't quite decipher the two thoughts that had crossed her mind. I shouldn't get so close so soon, but I can't help it. I barely slept that night. The next morning, Victoria had already left for work, leaving me a message saying she'd be at a forum all day and I could rest. I texted back, "Paid rest?" She instantly replied, "Yes, 20,000 a day even for rest." I wondered how best to relax while earning such a sum. I went back to sleep but was soon awakened by a call from Emily's boyfriend, Jason. "What's up, Jason?" I asked. The background was noisy, and Jason urgently said, "Alex, Emily's been beaten up." I bolted upright. "Who did it? Are they still there? I'm coming over right now. Call the police. We need to report this." As I hastily dressed, Jason hesitated and said, "It was Victoria." I stopped buttoning my shirt. "Who?" I arrived at the hospital to find the doctor treating Emily's facial injuries while Victoria stood outside the room silent. Jason explained that they had been walking hand in hand when Victoria suddenly rushed over and slapped Emily repeatedly before he could react. I asked Victoria, "Miss Victoria, can you explain why you hit her?" Victoria lowered her gaze, her face cold. She was with another man. My heart sank. The worst-case scenario had come true. Victoria had developed possessive feelings for Emily. The situation seemed serious, and I had to find a way to get Emily out of this mess. So, I rambled nonsense, but this also means she likes someone else. Victoria was shocked, you don't mind. I almost forgot she misunderstood my relationship with Emily. How could I explain this? I wiped the non-existent sweat from my forehead and said, "What can I do?" While thinking about a solution, I suddenly felt someone touch the back of my hand. Startled, I saw Victoria standing in the shadows, looking at me cautiously. She asked, "Does it have to be her?" I was confused. What? I looked into her eyes and heard her inner voice. "Can you look at me too?" I understood then. Victoria liked me. This was a carefully considered conclusion I reached after reflecting. During the meeting, all her inner thoughts were about me. Because of this, she mistakenly thought Emily was cheating on me when she saw her with Jason, which enraged her and led to the slap. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out why she liked me or when she started liking me. How did a plain, unremarkable life suddenly involve a wealthy heiress who had liked me for 7 years? Fortunately, my 1-month private psychological counseling job only had 10 days left. I decided to end the contract early and leave. I pretended not to know Victoria's feelings, and she tacitly didn't pursue me. Then, I received an invitation from C University for its th anniversary celebration, inviting alumni back. I initially didn't want to go, but Jason suggested he wanted to visit, so I agreed. Arriving early at C University, I wandered around the neighborhood and bumped into Aunt Jane, who used to run a restaurant there. During my school days, I would visit her restaurant 2 or 3 times a week just for her food. I asked, "Aunt Jane, do you remember me?" Aunt Jane, wearing an apron and holding a piece of tofu, looked at me for a long time before smiling. "I know you," I said. "I must have visited often for you to remember me." She shook her head. "That's not why." Before I could ask, she motioned for me to come in. "Come have lunch, there's a guest here too. Cooking for 1 or 2 isn't much different." I replied, "It might be inconvenient with a guest." Aunt Jane looked meaningfully at Victoria and said, "It's no problem if it's you." I couldn't refuse. Aunt Jane rarely cooked anymore, and I didn't want to miss the chance. Following her, I entered the small courtyard to find Victoria sitting there, brewing tea with elegant movements. Seeing me, she stopped, her face turning red. I heard her inner voice, "Is this a dream?" Aunt Jane said, "Don't just stand there, sit down. The food will be ready soon." Aunt Jane set the table near Victoria. Despite the familiar dishes, I couldn't fully enjoy them with Victoria so close. Aunt Jane asked, "How's the taste? Still like it was?" I snapped out of my daze, nodding, "Yes, I've missed this for a long time." Aunt Jane, shaking her fan, said, "I'm getting old, but my goddaughter learned my recipes. If you want this food, ask her." Distracted, I absent-mindedly replied, "Really? Where's her restaurant?" Aunt Jane laughed. "Not everyone can ask her to cook, but for you it's different." Seeing Aunt Jane glance at Victoria, I instantly understood. She meant Victoria, but Victoria remained expressionless, quietly clearing the table. Aunt Jane added pointedly, "Next time, come with someone or don't come at all, but 2 people are welcome." Victoria and I returned to C University in silence. Just before parting, I invited her to dinner to talk. Surprised, she agreed nervously. During the ceremony, Victoria sat with the distinguished alumni in the front, while Jason and I, bored, wandered around campus. I kept thinking about Victoria, feeling conflicted. Coincidentally, passing by the volleyball court, I asked Jason, "Do you remember the department flower, Tiffany? Why isn't she at this reunion?" Jason, eyes wide, nervously replied, "I don't remember her." But I read his mind. Why bring up Tiffany? Does Alex remember something? Should I change the subject? Sensing something was off, I started to question him, but was interrupted by his shout, "Watch out!" I didn't have time to react before a volleyball hit my head, sending me sprawling. Amid the chaos, I faintly heard Victoria's voice from 7 years ago. "Let him go, scum. I've called the police." I woke up in the hospital to find Victoria by my side, looking exhausted. I reached out, and she nervously handed me water, but I touched her hand instead. "Did you change your name?" Victoria froze, spilling water as she trembled. Victoria used a tissue to gently dry my hand. As she was about to pull away, I grabbed her fingers. I asked, "Did you used to be called Ava?" Back in my junior year, there was a theft incident in the freshman girls' dormitory. Several dorms were robbed, with total losses amounting to thousands. The surveillance cameras were conveniently broken during that period, so no one saw the thief. They all accused a girl named Eva because she was the only one without an alibi that night. I still remember standing in the lobby of the administrative building, where a group of teachers and police questioned Eva about why she stole the money. I walked in, and the look in her eyes was like seeing a glimmer of hope at the last moment of despair. I said she was with me that night. I paid her to tutor me at the bar. The teachers were skeptical and asked who studies at a bar. I smiled. It's my quirky habit. I study better in bars. I showed them photos as evidence, and Eva was cleared of suspicion. What I didn't mention was that she wasn't tutoring me that night. She was working as a server at the bar. She had accidentally broken a customer's drink and was forced to kneel and apologize. I was nearby and paid to resolve the situation. I believe people should be responsible for their mistakes, but they shouldn't bear the blame for something they didn't do. So when Eva was falsely accused of theft, I helped her again. Before I walked in, I saw her dead-eyed look and heard her thoughts, if living is this painful, would death be better? She didn't reveal her whereabouts out of pride, not wanting anyone to know she worked as a bar server, especially not wanting anyone to see the surveillance footage from that night. I didn't mind helping her hide the truth. By the time her name was cleared, it was nearly curfew. Eva silently followed me back to the dormitory. Before I entered the building, she finally spoke, "Can I know your name?" Without turning back, I waved my hand and said, "Alex." Why hadn't I connected Victoria to Eva? No one would think they were the same person. One was a quiet, pitiful girl who had to work part-time at a bar to make ends meet. The other was a stunning, noble heiress of the Liu family. It was a complete transformation. After helping her that one time, we had no further interactions. We were in different grades and departments, with no opportunities to cross paths. Then, an incident occurred that I never wanted to recall. At the end of my junior year, I saw a sweet-looking girl at the library, reading gracefully. I asked around and learned her name was Tiffany, the department beauty of the literature faculty. I developed a strong interest in her. She was the first girl I ever liked. I started to create chances to meet her, arranging romantic encounters and giving her extravagant gifts on holidays and birthdays. During our interactions, Tiffany didn't show any signs of trouble. Even my mind reading only picked up thoughts like, "So touched." But on my first birthday, she gave me a big surprise. That night she hinted she had brought her ID, and we walked farther and farther. Sensing something was wrong, I read her thoughts. Such a gullible rich kid, following me with just a wink. I wonder if my brother is ready. We'll extort him for a lot of money, and if his family doesn't pay, he can say hello to different parts of the world. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I stared at her, seeing her once beautiful face turn hideous. I stopped, feeling numb all over. Resisting the urge to slap her, I pulled my arm away and said, "I just remembered I have a class tonight. I need to go." I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm again. "It's so late. Are you really going to leave me alone out here?" Just as I was about to push her away, I felt dizzy, my body shaking uncontrollably. It was the drink she gave me after dinner. Moments later, a few men came over and dragged me away. I was done for. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. In that moment of despair, I heard another voice, a beam of light piercing my muddled consciousness. She said, "Let him go, scum. I've called the police. I won't let you get away with this. Alex, wake up. It's okay. I'm here." It was that girl. What was her name again? Eva? I had forgotten. She saved me. I was taken to the hospital, where I slept for 3 days despite having no external injuries. In those 3 days, a lot happened. Tiffany and her gang had powerful connections, and the case was nearly dropped due to insufficient evidence. Eva dropped out of school during this time. Soon after, the media in Sea City reported that Liu family's eldest daughter, Victoria, had returned from studying abroad and was about to join Liu Group, becoming the most dazzling figure in Jin District. After Eva became Victoria, Tiffany and her gang were imprisoned. Yet due to the trauma, I had forgotten this part of my past. I forgot the harm I suffered, and the girl who risked herself to save me. My family and friends, fearing the lingering trauma, decided not to talk about it. Only after being hit on the head by a volleyball did I suddenly remember. By then, 7 years had passed. Victoria said, "I'm not a wealthy heiress. I'm just an unwanted, illegitimate child of the Liu family. After their son died in a car accident, they remembered me, their only remaining biological daughter, and brought me back. I'm just a village girl who worked as a bar server and was humiliated over a bottle of wine." Victoria continued, "The Liu family's son died in a car accident, and only then did they remember I existed. I was just a country girl. I even worked as a bar server and was humiliated over a broken bottle of wine. She lowered her head, and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. My heart ached for her. I asked gently, "So you changed your name and returned as Victoria?" She nodded slightly, wiping away a tear. "I had no choice. They offered me a better life if I returned as their daughter. It was my chance to escape the life I had been living." I understood now why she had kept her past hidden, and why she had clung to me all these years. She had never forgotten the boy who stood up for her, the boy who saw her worth when no one else did. Victoria looked at me, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm not going to let the past define me. I've worked hard to become who I am today. But knowing you're here, it feels like a part of my past has finally caught up with me." I smiled, taking her hand. "You're not alone anymore, Victoria. We'll face this together." As we walked out of the hospital, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The truth was finally out, and with it, a new beginning. For both of us. I was always timid, afraid to let you see the real me. Yet this broken me fell for you. Do you find it disgusting? Victoria sat by the window, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. The bright sunlight bathed her, but she buried her face in the shadows, avoiding my gaze. Every word she spoke seemed to stab at her own heart, like a withering flower losing its vitality. I replied, "No." I reached out and touched her cheek. "You are a ray of light in my life." She paused, then looked up at me. In that moment, everything came to life. I was diagnosed with a mild concussion and was discharged after a few days. Emily came to pick me up, and Victoria puffed up her cheeks in silence when she saw her. I whispered to her, "We're siblings." My sister took our mother's surname. Victoria was suddenly bewildered, her eyes clear but confused. She cleared her throat and took the fruit from Emily's hand, saying, "Miss Emily, you didn't have to bring anything." Emily replied with exasperation, "Miss Victoria, I am his family." Using the still valid private counseling contract, Victoria took me back to her home. At first I hesitated. "Is this appropriate?" she huffed. "What do you want to eat?" Aunt Jane taught me some new recipes. I laughed. "Only children make choices. I want them all." "Who said it's not appropriate? It's perfect for recovery." Although I had a head injury, Victoria treated me like a bedridden old man. While she was making soup, I marveled, "Miss Victoria, is there anything you can't do? You can't be too perfect." She paused, and I heard her think, "I hope you never find out." What was she hiding from me? This question lingered for days until one night, I was awakened by the sound of something shattering. I walked out of my room and saw light coming from the corner room on the 3rd floor. I walked upstairs, stopped at the door, and heard muffled groans of pain. I tentatively called out, "Victoria?" The sound stopped. I asked, "Can I come in?" Victoria had said she didn't want me entering this room, and I respected that. But I couldn't leave her alone. After a long pause, just as I was debating whether to enter, Victoria's restrained voice came. "If it's you, you can." I turned the handle and was stunned. The room was set up like a rustic country house with a cement floor, stove, old wooden benches, and cabinets. Victoria was curled up in the cabinet, sweating and pale, looking at me silently. Depression. It wasn't just an excuse, it was real. I opened my mouth but couldn't say anything. My throat felt dry, and I was inexplicably saddened. Victoria reached out her hand, and I slowly walked over, crouching down to hug her. She buried her head in my neck, her voice trembling. "I promised my mom I wouldn't return to the Liu family, but I broke that promise." Everyone saw the radiant Victoria, but no one knew how she suffered every second in the Liu family. Returning to the family that abandoned her and her mother, pretending and being insincere. What choice did she have? At the time, no one could do anything to Tiffany. Victoria realized that her previous ideals were meaningless against the harsh reality. Without money or people, she could do nothing. She needed to grow up quickly, so she chose the path she hated most. From being bullied to now overpowering the Liu family, the years of psychological pressure had taken their toll. Only in a setting reminiscent of her childhood with her mother could she find some relief. Choking up, she said, "I'm not as perfect as you think." I slowly patted her back, noticing an old scar on her arm. It was from the time she brought me medicine and was scratched by Emily's car. When I asked Emily, she immediately knew who it was. Victoria wasn't perfect, but to me, she was unique. My voice trembled as I said, "Thank you, Victoria. From now on, let me be your medicine. You won't be alone anymore." Victoria's side story, April 18th, sunny. Today we agreed to go try on wedding dresses. He custom-made one for me and said he had a surprise. Since being with him, every day has felt like a good day. It's been a long time since I had an episode. That special room has remained closed for a while. After I finished my makeup, I saw a message from Alex. He said the flowers in the backyard were blooming beautifully. I could imagine the look on his face as he typed those words, and I couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, I felt a strange emotion. I reached out and touched my face, feeling tears. Despair washed over me inexplicably. One thought filled my mind: I will never get better. I leaned on the table, gasping, trying to push away the negative emotions. I kept telling myself that I was happy, that today was important, that I couldn't mess it up. I clenched my fists, sweating profusely. The sunlight streaming through the window felt harsh and annoying. I saw darkness falling, and all hope seemed lost. But then a voice called out, "Victoria!" Alex burst through the door, letting in a flood of light. Standing there with a large bouquet of freshly picked flowers, he was brighter than the sunlight. Sweaty from running, his hair stuck to his forehead, but he seemed oblivious. Breathlessly, he raised the flowers and said, "The weather is great today. Want to go for a walk and soak up the sun?" He smiled, his eyes only on me. I stared at him for a long time before finally reaching out. I knew my light had arrived.